Yes, thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased that we have this event today under the French presidency to the European Council and to have this hosted here at the University of Strasbourg, who we learned is a very strong actor for open science in France. Is I think, our biggest university in France in terms of students present, and is such a big actor for research that this is also for us an example. We have to take the universities on board if we want to advance open science in general. If we want to advance the EOSC, we have to count on them and we have to make use of their expertise and their enthusiasm for this topic. So I just want to share a few thoughts about national perspectives on policies supporting the EOSC. So what is the motivation we have? So we have this big transition we want to do. We want to make open science the new normal. So this, of course, causes us a bit of uncertainty for the research performing organizations, for the funders. What do they have to expect? What do they have to consider in the upcoming years? Is there a guarantee for them that an investment is well done because it's going to be something which is there to last? So we have also, at the same time, we have this large number of actors in there. So that's sometimes a bit scary because we have to talk with the users, we have to talk with the laboratories, the institutes, the European Commission, with the different actors which are already out there. And there are so many committees on open science, nobody knows them all, but we have to somehow make all this work together in order to arrive at this goal of open science as the new normal. So we need this strong coordination, and I think on national level the policies are a very useful tool to give a frame and an orientation for the actors in research. So then, of course, the national policies shouldn't be just there as a nice to have, but they should also trigger something: investment, commitment by the large research organizations, and collaboration on the European level on these topics. So we have to build upon communities' experience, right? So it cannot be only top-down, it has to be also bottom-up. So what are the problems you are facing in your projects, in your work from day to day? So where is the lack of regulation? Where is the policy which might pose a problem, which has to be changed? So we shouldn't put policies just for the sake of the policy. We should be very careful because every regulation might impose something we haven't foreseen. We see this now with the Digital Services Act, where there's a lot of discussion afterwards. How can we make sure that it doesn't have an impact we didn't anticipate there? So we need the input from the association members, from the doers, from the users and the providers of the EOSC. We need the EOSC projects, which know from their day-to-day activities what works and what doesn't work. We need organizations like EIRG to help in this discussion. And we have to have this discussion at the European level with the experience with existing policies and concerns about the implementation in order to avoid surprises afterwards. So I see certain risks. So we have national policies in place which not always trigger activities. What is the harm in that? The harm in that is that we lose the trust of the researchers in the labs, because we put in a policy, we say we want to do this and that, and then we don't put money there, we don't put resources there, we don't convince our organizations to act accordingly. And that's a very big damage. So we have to be very careful what kind of policies we put in there if we are not willing to go the next step. So some policies which are very complex. So if you see the Data Act, or all these acts we have been putting out, if you have these documents, they are very scary, and they might encourage you as an actor to go into this field because it's very complex. So you need some advice also. So we have to communicate better. along with the Data Act, with the Digital Services Act, and I come later to the European health data spaces, we have to communicate what is in there in order to understand what this means for us. So of course there are a lot of opportunities. A policy is a great tool to raise awareness. If we put out nationally something about open science, we can be sure that the message is heard. And then, of course, as I said, then there's the expectation also that it leads to funding, engagement, etc. And it's also a way of changing the culture, because we have to change the way we do research on the laboratory, on the university level, and that takes, unfortunately, this takes time. It might take some time, for some things it might take half a generation to change that. And last but not least, we have to give the actors a guideline what to invest up on and what to do in the future, because not each university can develop this themselves. We might have to give them guidelines for that. And of course, the national policies need to be aligned at European level, because if each country has something different in place, that's not going to help us if we want to move forward. So at the steering board level, we are thinking, of course, always what to do next. So what kind of policy issues we see. So these are just some ideas we have right now, which we are now discussing at the EOSC Steering Board, which we are going to develop perhaps into opinion papers. And in the course of this work, we are going to ask you as actors in EOSC to give your opinion, your advice, what should be in there. So there are 3 examples: data literacy and skills and competences. So of course, open science needs a lot of skills, competences we don't have in quantity and in quality in many of our countries present. And we have to advance on this topic. EOSC and the private sector, there are very practical questions. The procurement, for example, is a big topic now. So what is our aim? What do we want as a role of the private sector in the EOSC? What should they be doing after Horizon Europe? Should they be running the show, or how do we see that? So we first have to have the discussion, what is our vision there? And then we can put in policies. So that's a discussion to have. But it's also about the relation, for example, with Gaia-X. So then data sovereignty, Jörg said it's not a problem to use Google as long as we have a control, or we are in charge of our data. So this is what we want also in the EOSC. So perhaps we don't need a lot there, but we have to think what is necessary in order to stay ahead of the game and to make sure that the data quality we put out in EOSC is there, because this is going to be what is going to be judged. If we put out crappy data, crappy services, then the EOSC is not going to be a success. So we have to stay in control there. 2 minutes, okay, I'm there. So this is just the summary. So I think we have to work in this policy issues on real life experience. So we need the input from you all. We have to make sure if we put out policies, they have to have an impact. We cannot just put out policies. We have to think in advance if we are able to feed them with investment. So we should make sure, and this is a work at the steering board level, I think, that to have this alignment of the national policies. And I just mentioned the next policy issues where we are going to have this discussion in the subgroup, and then we are going to iterate with you in the different fora, and we want to aim at opinion papers towards the end of 22. So I just mentioned briefly the European health data space, because who of you has read the regulations for the European health data space? 2, 3. Okay, that's already not so bad. So that's something, it has a lot of access, of course. It's a very thick document. But there is, for example, a main goal in there is to share research medical data for research in Europe. Sounds familiar to you? Because it's something like we want to do in the EOSC. In the whole document, there's twice mentioned the EOSC, just in the introduction, some part. So perhaps there's nothing to do, but perhaps we should make sure that in this regulation, we make sure that we don't invest, again, several billion euros over the next years without taking into account what has been already invested. So I would ask the steering board members to really look into this document, because it's not enough if one of us goes to the other ministries, because it's interministerial, to say, okay, we have to work there also with the EOS. That's not going to work. So we all have to, as a community, make an effort if we want to have a saying there to work in progress there. So we not only have to look at the policies we think are necessary for the EOS, we have to be very careful what policies, what regulations are put out there, and we have to be very reactive, because it's a very fast-moving field. And if we come late, then we have no influence whatsoever on the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.